Welcome to After Dark at the Fixed Ops Roundtable, featuring Katrina Ness, Vanessa Collins, and Ted Ings. This episode is brought to you by BG Products, partners beyond products. And now for your hosts, Ted Ings, Vanessa Collins, and Katrina Ness.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the After Dark Show. Tonight, I'm joined with my peer, Vanessa Collins, the one and only Ted Ings, Len Bavia, and Robin Butler, here to give us an update about Sean.
All right, welcome everybody, and excited to have you all here on After Dark at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. We had a great discussion just a couple nights ago, and very honored to have Len Bavia with us tonight. Sean Butler was scheduled to be with us. His wife Robin is with us as well. Sean went through, I guess, a day of chemo, Robin, and I know some of those days are maybe better or worse than others, and maybe give us an update on how Sean is doing.
Hi. Well, it's really odd how chemo goes. I mean, they've been decreasing his chemo dose some because he's had pretty much every side effect imaginable. And last time, 2 weeks ago, he did pretty well with it, and then took it down again this time, and he's doing terrible. Right out the gate, as soon as he got home, he's been very not feeling well. But his labs came back a little worse this time. They're starting him on Neulasta, which is because his white blood cell count has dropped so bad. And so that's hopefully going to boost that back up. And I think they're going to recheck that on Friday. They're going to take one of the chemos away after this go and then add in some radiation, due to have scans over the next 3 weeks and then another surgical consult at UVA to see if they are able to do surgery. But he's been having some pretty serious issues lately. So it's just been very overwhelming and just taking it day by day. His weight's about the same despite, eating and drinking. That's not really gone up or unchanged, I should say. He's been passing some what's called uric acid stains in his colostomy bag due to dehydration. But he is drinking, so I don't know. It's just all kind of puzzling right now, but that's where we're at for now.
Robin, he is the strongest person that I know personally, and we had him on the big event just a couple weeks ago. And I always want to bring Sean on to get updates on him because the community is so interested in how he's doing, and he's a fighter. Robin, he's going to work. I can't believe it. Every day he's going to work with all this going on in his life. And,
yes, he's given it his all. I do not know how he does it because I'm behind the scenes. I know how bad he feels, and a daily battle for him. But he just pushes, and yeah, he's not gonna give up on work. I honestly don't know how he's doing it, and I mean I'm a nurse, so I'm sitting back medically going, I can't believe he is able to function. But
I know Len and I have we've both dealt with some cancer and some setbacks in our lifetimes as well. Certainly not what Sean has been and your family is going through, but our hearts go out to you. And Len, I mean, this is such a part of real life, and we see this happen so often. But Sean is an amazing fighter.
oh my gosh.
I know he's got the right attitude. I don't know how he keeps so positive, but I'm sure that's very beneficial. I know state of mind is important. So he's got a whole industry rooting for him, Robin, and you give him all of our best.
I appreciate that.
Through all of this, he still comes and supports the After Dark shows and is always active in the comments. He's really fighting. He's very amazing.
Yeah, he is. He's he's a very special person, and this has been, very hard for all of us to see him almost suffering like this daily. But you know, I think what keeps him going is his job and everything, and giving it his all.
Right. Well, Robin, we're here in your corner, and I know I speak to Sean, probably daily, okay, and I know you, not quite as often, but everybody, if you're not aware of it already, you should be. We have set up a website. It's called fixedopscares.org, where you can go directly to a GoFundMe page and help support Sean and his family. And we're putting it up on the screen, fixedopscares.org, and to help offset some of the medical bills that are not covered by insurance. And Robert, we're going to keep promoting that right through the holidays and, all the way through, because we know how important that is to you and your family. And
Yes, I really appreciate that, because the year coming to the end, and then the big $10,000 deductible starts over. So,
Yep. All right. Well, give Sean our best. I know everyone was looking forward to seeing him tonight. We're going to have him back, Robin, because the ladies want to meet him. And again, he is a huge supporter of everything that we're doing here at Fixed Ops. So
yes, he felt really bad that he had to miss it. And I think up until the very end, he was going to try, but he's just been so down this afternoon with all the side effects hitting him, and he's been very sick.
all right. God bless you, and we give you our best. And
Well, thank you.
we'll speak soon.
All
I
the best.
appreciate Thank y'all. I hope
Best of Sean.
everybody has a happy holiday, and I appreciate everything, all the prayers, and everyone reaching out and being supportive, and we're so blessed for that.
Yeah. And we're
All the
blessed to
best.
have you in our lives, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. We'll see you during the holidays or before the
Okay.
holidays. Don't worry.
Okay. Thank you, Ted. Have a good night.
Give Sean our best.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Robin.
So, Len, I remember when I first met you and you told us the story, you had quite the scare. I mean, it was all over for you. I remember reading about it in Automotive News, and, miracles do happen. And
Yeah, they really do. And, that's the message I was trying to convey to Sean, online indirectly. You got to keep up the fight and, be your own advocate. And it sounds like he's got a great advocate in Robin. So let's just hope that he continues to do well and withstands it, and, better days ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So everybody, we invited Len Bavia, who's the senior partner at Bavia Blatt, dealerlaw.com, to come on with us tonight and talk to us a little bit about this newly formed and announced Hyundai and Amazon alliance. And, Len, you and I have talked about some similar things, but not exactly this in the past and in the recent past. But Len, this one is certainly different, and it's poised. It could potentially shake up the industry.
Yeah, there's no shortage of headlines, right? I mean, it seems like every time we get together, it's some other, I don't want to call it an attack on the franchise system, but certainly something to really delve into. And, it's gotten a lot of interest. Dealers are very concerned. Doesn't mean they're fighting it. Doesn't mean that they're rejecting it, but there are certain elements of it that raises the specter of, what's really going on here. Is this a Trojan horse? Is this all that it appears to be? Is it just another lead referral source, or is this the beginning of, a sideways attack and the introduction of the agency model? So, right now there's a lot of unknown elements of it, and the fact that a lot of these elements are unknown, and Hyundai in this case has not been as forthcoming as the dealers would have liked, it raises a red flag. And, I know you've had guests on recently to talk about the marketing aspect of it, and I'm sure we can go on for hours about what the benefits and pitfalls are to manufacturers, dealers, consumers. But, generally what I get called on to do is to talk about, well, let's assume that it's going to get rolled out as most people think it is. What does that really mean in the context of franchise laws? What does it violate the laws? Is it compliant? Is this great for dealers? Is it even good for the OEM? Is it as good for Hyundai as it may think it is? What are the implications for Amazon? And finally, consumers. There's a movement out there about, maybe direct sales is the next wave. Well, is that really good for consumers in terms of price and convenience and service, whether it be warranty? And, so we can plug in the facts and the law. That's what I can do, I think. I'll leave to the people in the showroom and fixed ops and the sales departments to determine whether this is good for the business. But, typically I get called in to say, wait, can they do this? What does this really mean, given the fact that every state in the country has a franchise statute? So what can the manufacturers do and what can't they do? So that's really the conversations I've been having over the past week. I mean, this is all kind of come to the surface, I think, in the past 10 days. And I've spoken to a lot of Hyundai dealers in that period. And, some are less concerned, some are ready to go to the mat. So you got the full spectrum of interest at stake here.
So Katrina, I buy a lot of stuff from Amazon. My daughter does. I'm sure everybody on this panel tonight has bought from Amazon. It's convenient and it's easy. But Katrina, I know you've got a couple of questions, waiting here for Len.
Yeah, of course. I mean, everyone loves Amazon. It's convenient. It's fast. It's there. Now they have same day shipping. It can arrive in a couple hours. But why should dealers specifically be paying attention to this partnership between Hyundai and Amazon? Why is that important?
All right. That very, very logical question. And, there are lead referral sources out there, cars.com, Auto Trader, Car Gurus. I mean, the list goes on and on, Edmunds. The difference there is most of them, to a large extent, don't involve the manufacturer. I mean, that's not to say that manufacturers don't have lead referral, e-commerce platforms. I mean, General Motors has, you go on GM sites, you can find out where all the inventory is. You can set your parameters based on geography and fill out the different filtering components by color and equipment. So the concept is not new. It's convenient and it sounds innocuous, but the devil is in the details. And unfortunately, we don't know the details. So what does it really mean? It means that if you're a Hyundai dealer, you should be most concerned. And if you're a dealer of another OEM's product line, you should be next concerned, because Amazon is a major player. They don't just dip their toe in the water, right? They're going to dive in. And it's Hyundai today, and next week it could be Toyota or GM or Chrysler or any other manufacturer. So if I'm a dealer of a non-Hyundai product, I'm just as concerned as a Hyundai dealer, because it could be next week or next month that another announcement could be made. So, the large question is, what does this mean for my dealership? And what does it mean for my customers? What does it mean for my employees? What's lurking behind what seems to be a rather plain vanilla lead referral source? And, what I said to some of my clients is, I'm concerned about, some of the facts that are already out, but what I'm most concerned about are the things that are being kept quiet. And just to give you a little, backdrop factually, Hyundai, Jose Munoz announced this at the LA Auto Show, didn't tell any of his dealers. In fact, he didn't even tell the head of dealer council until I think 8 hours before he made the announcement himself. So raises the question, if this is so good for the industry, why weren't the dealers made aware of it until literally hours before everybody else in the country learned about it when the announcement was made on national TV? So as a lawyer, you might say, well, that's just cynicism. But, my view is if Amazon and the direct-to-consumer model is supposed to be transparent, well, then why wasn't there transparency with respect to the key players from the very outset? So my antenna go up as a lawyer and say, all right, what's really lurking here? Is this a Trojan horse? Is this something that was intended to be kind of a plain vanilla business model? And then when the dealers embrace it because they're being told it's not a threat, and then it's rolled out to other manufacturers, is that when the screws are going to finally get turned, 12 months from now when everybody's on board and it's too late to unscramble the egg, so to speak? So when dealers call me, and they know more about this than I do. They know of the implications of, direct to consumer sales, and not to suggest this is truly direct to consumers, because, Hyundai is trying to seek the safe harbor here of saying, well, this is not, Amazon is not selling the car. directly, and Hyundai's not selling the vehicle directly. It's still the dealer. Well, that's because it's set up so that the customer ultimately takes delivery from the dealer, and that's all well and good. But let's go step by step by step to see whether or not this is closer to a direct sale by a manufacturer, how the prices are set up. It's very easy for, ivory tower, internet savvy people to develop a business model, but not really understand what goes on in the foxhole, which is, I guess, the showroom floor. I'll just give you one illustration because, 60 to 70%, I think that's the statistic. Most consumers, 60 to 70%, have trade-ins. So how do you interact online with Amazon if you have a trade-in? Mm-hmm. So that was the first question that dealers asked, when they were finally called last week into a meeting with, National Dealer Council. So if 60 to 70% of consumers have a trade-in, how is this Amazon partnership with Hyundai work?
Right.
And the answer was, we don't know yet. We have to work that out.
Well, a couple comments in the chat, if I may, real quick, Len. Guy has a very interesting comment here about as long as the dealer's in delivery and makes margin, there's not a problem. I want you to comment on that. Also, I want to go ahead and I want to ask Patrick Brown. Patrick, I don't know. I know you're a dealer. I don't know if you're a Hyundai dealer, but he says we still have not heard an official announcement from Hyundai to dealers. I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. I know there was a call with dealer council. I don't know that every dealer was invited. It might have just been the local dealer council members who were on that call, and possibly not the rest of the dealer network. So to answer the first question, how is this bad as long as dealers make their margin? Well, again, devil's in the details, right? If the price that's put up on Amazon is list price, then all well and good, and the dealers can work down from that. But it doesn't seem to be the way it's going to be promoted. What they're talking about is no dealer can advertise a vehicle lower than what they call the MAP price, which is the lowest price that the manufacturer and the dealer agree that can be promoted, right? So viscerally, that means that these vehicles are going to be advertised, because why would a dealer advertise the price at MSRP if every other dealer is going to promote a lower price? So right off the bat, the price, now this is good for consumers, right? Because that means the prices will be lower potentially than if a consumer walked into a dealer and was quoted MSRP. But nowadays, we're post-COVID, so MSRP is really not the barometer anymore. So, the jury is still out on whether a consumer is going to get a better price through Amazon. But what we do know is that the minimum price that a dealer can advertise really leaves Hyundai dealers with no margin. Very, very little profit, if any. So you might say, well, then I guess that leaves the profit center, the after sale department, F&I, to be the profit center. And then during these calls, what was disclosed was no, the dealers cannot provide traditional F&I services to consumers. Consumers are going to be directed by Amazon and Hyundai to Hyundai Finance. That's problematic. Not only is it problematic, it violates most franchise laws.
No.
So, when I listen to people talk about this that are in the marketing and F&I and sales department, they have differing opinions on whether this is good. I come at it a little bit differently, and I say, well, let me plug holes in it legally, not because dealers want to plug holes in it, but you have to do an exhaustive review of this to see whether it passes legal muster, and that component alone violates the franchise laws in most states. So, but more to the point of the question, isn't it no harm, no foul if the dealer's making a profit? Well, what's the backdrop? Over the past, I'd say 5 to 7 years, just about every Hyundai dealer in the country was pressured to do an image upgrade. And those image upgrades, what I mean, basically redo the facility, cost anywhere from $2 to $5 million. So how do you ask a dealer to incur that type of an expense and then come out with an announcement that says, this is going to be good for you. Consumers are going to buy cars basically at invoice. And don't worry, because you'll still be left, with your, warranty work and fixed ops, customer pay work. Well, you can't just take the front end of the business away from the dealer. And I don't mean just the price on the new car. I mean, the no potential for a finance reserve, right? After sale items, extended warranties, we're being told, are not going to be left to the dealer. So essentially, the entire front end of the transaction seems to have been emasculated. Again, we don't know for a fact. This is just, I don't know that it's hearsay because it's coming from dealer counsel who's in touch with Hyundai. But again, it raises the specter that this is really going far afield. And then ultimately, nobody likes when a dealer or a dealer advocate like myself talks about what's good for the consumer, right? Because they feel, well, you're just passing the buck. And if it doesn't work out for the consumer, that's the cover you get. But if I'm a consumer and I contact Amazon, I go online and I don't have the best credit in the world, which is not, uncommon, especially for, entry-level vehicles. And I can't get financing because Hyundai Credit really doesn't cater to subprime loans. What happens? That deal could die before it even gets to the dealer. And if the dealer can't, under this arrangement, offer 4 or 5 other lenders that maybe will provide financing to subprime customers, again, that deal is DOA. It's dead on arrival. Let me give you another example. Again, this is a cynical lawyer's point of view, right? I'm not a marketing person. So, if a Hyundai dealer calls me, and as I've fielded many, many calls in the past 10 days, is this legal? Well, if a customer isn't permitted to address the trade-in, right, through Amazon because there's no mechanism in place yet, then again, that customer is never going to be transferred to the dealer, theoretically, at least based on the scant information that's out there. Again, that deal could be dead on arrival. So is that good for the consumer? Consumer is not getting the best opportunity to get financing. How about a lease termination, right? Customer is on the end of a 3-year lease, brings it back to goes online to Amazon, right? Because that's now going to be very heavily promoted. Is there a mechanism in the process to deal with the potential positive equity in the lease? Because there are a lot of lease terminations now that have positive equity. Is Amazon going to be set up so that customer is going to get the benefit of that positive equity? So someone who maybe can't afford a $500 a month payment, well, guess what? That $500 payment could be a $400 payment if the positive equity could be rolled into a lease. Is that discussion going to take place with a rep from Amazon? Unlikely. And then if their response is, don't worry, as soon as the customer calls, we're going to turn them over to the dealer. Well, isn't that a little deceptive to the customer? Because the customer is excited about this process of not having to deal with the dealer, right? That's kind of what the predicate is here. Amazon is going to be, direct to consumer or quasi direct to consumer. So if you say to the customer, oh, you have a trade-in, or you need a loan, or you don't have, 800 credit, then here's the dealer. You have a choice of dealers. Well, isn't that a little bit of a deceptive trade practice to the consumer who went to Amazon in the first place? The same way, we can buy shoes and cameras and, bicycles on Amazon. You want a seamless, simple, transparent transaction. How is that going to be accomplished if the response that the Hyundai dealers are getting from dealer counsel on these phone calls is, well, we'll just send the customer to you? Well, doesn't that defeat the purpose of direct selling to consumers? So I'm not plugging holes in it. This may be the greatest thing ever, and maybe it'll ultimately get refined. But if I were Hyundai and I were Amazon, before I rolled this out and decided not to tell a single dealer until 8 hours before it was rolled out, I would have said, no, the better practice would have been to get the busiest and best Hyundai dealers in the country, fly them somewhere, sit around a big table and spend 3 days hashing all of this out. So I think, the idea that they did this in the middle of the night is going to portend a lot of problems, because a dealer who is upset enough can go into court in just about in the states that are implicated, right? The pilot program, I should have prefaced this, is only going to be rolled out in 18 states initially. I'm sorry, 18 dealers in about 4 states or 5 states.
Oh, okay.
So the test case is very limited, but I can speak to New York because that's where I am. In New York, it would not be difficult for a dealer to go in and get an injunction, or temporary stay, we call it, to put the entire program on hold. Now, do they want to do that? I'm not going to speak to that, but if they did that, doesn't that put Amazon and Hyundai on their heels for no good reason?
Right.
and in turn, that puts a hold on other manufacturers. Let's assume this is a good program. Again, I don't want to be, cynical, but dealers have a reasonable basis to be doubtful because of the way it was rolled out. So if they exercise their legal rights to put this program on hold, how is that good for Amazon and Hyundai and other manufacturers who are following it? So I think the big mistake here is not to involve the retail experts, which are franchise dealers. I mean, it's been 125 years. I think at some point, manufacturers and e-commerce platforms should give the dealers some credit that they can probably build a better mousetrap or aid in the process anyway. And that didn't happen here. And that's where the problem lies, in the secrecy.
Yeah, I think it's the big aspect of like betrayal almost. It seems like it kind of feels like a betrayal to the dealers. Like this outside source just wiggled their way right into the selling process, to the business. And it's like you said, they found out overnight, like no one knew about it.
Well, let's assume, for the sake of discussion, that there's no diabolical plan. There's no malevolence here, that Hyundai and Amazon are not trying to dupe the dealers. But you still have to make sure a program complies with the law, right? And you have to make sure that the intended benefit to consumers can actually be accomplished. I don't see how it can be accomplished to resemble the Amazon experience, because buying a car is far more complex than just about every other item. I mean, you can't buy a house on Amazon, right? The next most complicated transaction is a car. So before you try and offer the sale of a car, which is the documents at the closing of a transaction and purchasing or leasing a car is almost the same as buying a house. The disclosure, the FTC compliance issues, all the regulatory disclosures, very difficult to do that online. Even during the height of COVID, when, dealers had to try and sell remotely,
Sure,
a very, very small percentage of consumers wanted to do the entire transaction online. I mean, everyone got an education in the process, but one of the things they should have taken away is 95% of consumers don't want a seamless, touchless transaction. So, all right, so, Amazon is a pioneer. So if anyone can do it, they can do it. But I would have liked to have seen someone in their legal department called someone, in the legal department on behalf of a dealer association, whether it's NADA or a state dealer association, sat around the table and said, how can we put this forward where no one is going to go to court because they're concerned that this is going to be an evisceration of the franchise model? And that's a real threat here because, like I said, a lot of dealers are viewing this as a Trojan horse. They made it as plain and simple as they possibly could, although there's no information. You just heard from Patrick Brown, who said he's a Hyundai dealer and he hasn't heard a word yet. Why should consumers find out before dealers about the intricacies of the program? It's not like they're going to roll it out in 6 months or 12 months. It's about 3 weeks or 4 weeks from now that, according to what we've heard, it's going to be rolled out. So they're a far cry from complying with the franchise laws. And the risk there is they're going to get the dander of the franchise dealers up because they don't know if they should feel threatened or be happy about this.
Vanessa, you had a very good question to follow up with Len on more than just the car sale.
Yeah, so why is the customer's data and who manages it so critical to this discussion?
Well, there's a lot of speculation out here that, this is a data grab by Amazon. Again, no proof of that, but, Amazon thrives on having consumer data. So if they can get into intimate details about a customer's buying preferences, their lease termination dates, loan information, credit profile, there's a lot that can be done with that. There are a lot of state franchise laws that say that consumer data belongs to the dealer, not a third-party provider. Again, was that sorted out? Is Amazon concerned that keeping customer data as a third-party lead referral source violates these franchise laws? How is Amazon getting compensated? Are the dealers going to pay Amazon? Does that add an extra layer of expense that the consumer is going to have to absorb? Is that beneficial to consumers that now there's, the anti-dealer set call dealers the intermediary, right? The unnecessary middleman. So are there now two middlemen that costs have to be passed on to consumers? So, a cynic could make a very good case that this is not good for dealers. It's premature to suggest that this is really all bad. I'm just suggesting that because this was shrouded in secrecy, that the suspicious nature of, this could put a big hurting on the franchise system, because if the front end business is totally being taken away from dealers and all they are going to be are delivery agents, because the margins are going to go down, there are no financing opportunities for the dealer to participate in, and no after sale, such as extended warranties, because Hyundai is going to take care of that. What's left for the dealer? And this is on the heels of spending millions of dollars building these beautiful facilities. So, I don't speak like a marketing person, because maybe I'm being too cynical and too critical. And maybe this is the greatest thing that ever happened, because it assuages the concern of consumers about the unpleasant experience of buying a car. I know that's the narrative, and let's assume it's true. But how does it help consumers if the things that dealers are really good at, and the things that only they know about, the day-to-day values of a trade-in, how to get a deal bought with a selection of 4 or 5 vendors, how to roll positive equity into a deal so a vehicle can be affordable. Again, Amazon is venturing into an area that even the very best and most experienced people have differences of opinion on, and how to best serve the consumer and keep the profitability of the franchise and the efficacy of the franchise system alive. Because if dealers are threatened by this, and this turns out to be the Trojan horse I keep mentioning, and dealers are now financially threatened because they can't survive just on the back end. And let's take it one step forward, even though EVs seem to be taking a pause right now. But what if EVs were gaining market share the way that manufacturers thought they would a year ago? So that was a threat on the fixed ops department. So if all of this was going forward as planned, this is a threat on the front end, and EVs are a threat on the back end. So where does that leave the franchise dealer? And ultimately, it's the consumer that's supposed to be the beneficiary of the franchise system.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many emails I get when I give presentations like this, and they say, "Oh, you're just spewing protectionist statutory." All of the states have this protectionist language in their statutes because dealers are politically connected. That's a bunch of nonsense. I mean, there's some truth to it. There are safeguards in place to deal with disputes between dealers and manufacturers because of the investment. But understand, the incidental beneficiaries of these franchise laws are consumers, because cars are necessities. And if you put dealers out of business at the whim of a manufacturer, well, who's really hurt? Of course, the dealer's hurt personally, and his employees are hurt. But aren't consumers negatively impacted if they can't get warranty service close to their home because the dealers were put out of business based on these type of formula? So there's a lot going on over the past 10 days, and I think every franchisee of every line make should be paying very close attention. Not so much to put a stop to it, because this is the wave. E-commerce is the wave of the future, but I think it has to be done intelligently. So each of the constituents, manufacturer, lead referral source, dealer, consumer, dealer employees, we don't even have to get into the discussion of how important, the state's economies, they rely on the survival of dealers because of the amount of people that are employed by dealerships. So if you kick them to the curb, does that really help consumers? Does it really help manufacturers? So there's a whole host of things that really have to be thought out. And I'm just a little concerned about how precipitous this came to the forefront with no information. I mean, here you have Hyundai dealers saying they haven't heard a word yet.
Katrina, this gentleman in the chat right now, I think you may know him, Jim Fitzpatrick from CBT News. He says all the other OEMs are allowing Hyundai to make the first move. And Len, that's correct.
Well, look, they're the stalking horse, right? So to hear Hyundai tell it, they'll say, "Well, this is a pilot. We're going to iron out the kinks in the program. We're going to rely on our dealers to help us sort it all out." That's a very holistic and positive point of view. I hope that's the case. But I do agree, and I think Jim he's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on in the industry as good as anyone. So I think Hyundai is first in line. And I don't, like I said at the outset, I don't think Amazon is the type of player that, is interested in just one of the many manufacturers out there. So this is a precursor. And that's why it's important that dealers of all brands pay close attention and support the dealers in making sure they have a seat at the table. I don't think dealers are trying to put a stop to it. I mean, strategically, this is kind of a lawyer's approach. Sometimes you have to put a stop to something just to get a seat at the table.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be, the advice that lawyers like myself are giving to dealers. If you have a legal basis to put a stop to something, it's not to kill it. It's just to kind of hash out what's good for all the parties that are involved, including the consumer.
So, Len, what should the dealers in our audience be thinking about or looking at now? What should they be preparing and getting ready? Obviously, they want to get as much information as possible. You mentioned state, local associations. I know they are very active. The lobbying efforts are amazing and what they've been able to accomplish around the country. What should dealers be concerned about? What should they be doing now to take
Well,
action?
I can get on my soapbox a little bit here because I've said this in so many, and I've said it on your show in the past,
Mhm.
Ted, that I think state associations are really excellent resources. They have the attention of the manufacturers, NADA just as much. But I think the first order of business really is for dealers to engage their dealer council and ask the hard questions. And don't be satisfied with, we don't know this answer yet, we have to hash it out. Well, if you don't know an answer to what's going to happen with a trade-in, it's not like 2% of consumers have trade-ins. More than half have trade-ins, and some will argue close to 80%, whatever the number really is. It's a meaningful component of the transaction. And if they're going to launch a program like this and leave consumers out in the cold, I can get deeper into the discussion. For example, if these leads are not going to be allocated fairly, that means that the dealers that are not servicing customers in their own market area are going to be getting a bad report card. I'll put it very generally. There's pumping in and pumping out. The ramifications of that, if you're not selling effectively in your market area, that means you're deficient and your franchise could be at risk, right? So how do we know that manufacturers, and I'm not talking about Hyundai, but specifically, but let's assume all the manufacturers are next in line one at a time. You could falsely engineer a default by a dealer by simply controlling the process. So, for example, if you have a dealership in a lower income area and most of your customers are subprime, and this program doesn't recognize the need for consumers to have more than Hyundai finance, then what happens? That dealer in that market area is going to sell a far less number of vehicles than he ordinarily would. How does that make the dealer look? Do you think Hyundai is going to say, well, that's our fault, that's not your fault? That's doubtful. They're going to say you're not penetrating your market. We don't want to hear all your excuses. So that's why I say there's so much more than meets the eye than simply let's help consumers have a transparent, convenient experience. The purchase of a vehicle doesn't lend itself to that unless every constituent helps each other work through it. This is very complicated, and to shoot from the hip like this, I think, is a mistake, not just for Hyundai, but for the manufacturers that follow. So if I were the legal counsel for Toyota and General Motors, and I'd say, hold the phone, Hyundai, we're in this together. Let's work as a team, because if this is truly the way vehicles are going to be purchased, don't ruin it for us. Make sure dealers have a seat at the table. Let's explore every nuance of a transaction, and don't lead with your chin by violating franchise laws at the very outset, because you're going to give angry dealers or confused dealers the right to put a stop to this immediately. Like tomorrow if they wanted to. So that doesn't help anybody.
A lot of great comments coming in. And Jim, I think you may have addressed this a little bit earlier in the show. Is it possible to get an injunction on this from a judge? And I guess that varies by jurisdiction and where the program is being.
It does, but I can point to two or three examples. In my state, in New York, if a manufacturer collects leads, which they are entitled to do, they have to distribute those leads based on where the customer either lives or works. So if this one dealer in New York, because in New York there's only one dealer, and there's New Jersey and California and Florida and Georgia are the only states. That means that a customer who logs on to Amazon who lives either in one extreme, at Buffalo, New York, is referred to the one dealer who's in this pilot program, or another customer on Long Island, also another extreme of the state of New York, gets referred to this dealer who's nowhere close to Long Island. Well, ipso facto, that's a violation of the New York franchise law. So to answer Jim's question, yes, it's very possible to get an injunction, because unless Hyundai is willing to show, and so far they have said no, all of the leads are going to this one dealer in this pilot period. Well, that's enough to get the stay or an injunction, depending on how you approach it, in the state of New York. Does that help anybody to stop this program in its tracks, assuming it's all good and there's no reason to be concerned? This is going to be beneficial. Well, why run the risk of having a dealer do that? Address these issues. Negative equity, or positive equity.
Positive equity, yeah.
That's a big deal. There's a lot of that going on. How are you going to address that? You're going to discourage consumers from going forward with the transaction, because you're going to shut the door, because they're not even going to know they have positive equity. They're just going to get a price and a payment from Hyundai Credit, and they're going to say, well, that's $100 too much. It's a shame, because that's a potential loss. Or they have a trade-in, and they're going to say, well, we don't have a mechanism to deal with your trade-in. Go to a dealer. Well, I didn't log on to Amazon to deal with a dealer. That's why I like this program. So there are so many flaws. I hope it gets worked out. I think it should get worked out, but it can't be worked out in a way that threatens the franchise system, because forget the dealers for the moment. That's unfair to consumers. Consumers need to have service in their own communities for convenience. You're driving children to school, or you're going to medical appointments, or going to work. You can't say, well, I'm going to go to an Amazon center. I'm going to find, wherever you decide to have service. Let's look at Tesla as an example of that. There are no local Teslas. I mean, they're trying. They'll send a vehicle to your home if it's a maintenance item, but if it's something that requires a flatbed, that's not going 3 miles away. That car's going 2 hours away. You may not get it back for a week. You can't tell your kids you can't take them to camp or school or go to a doctor's appointment. This is the real world, and the franchise system has worked perfectly. It has its flaws. We all know there are things that need to be improved, but you can't, eradicate it from the face of the earth and at the same time say this is good for consumers. The two concepts they can't coexist.
Len Bavia, I love it. You really make us think. Len Bavia, everybody, he's the senior partner at Bavia Blatt, dealerlaw.com. I can't believe that's a great URL, Len, and you've had that for a long time, dealerlaw.com.
It's the only advantage of getting old, Ted, is, when I was looking for a domain name, I had no competition, because, the internet was just invented. So I had the first dibs on a name like that. So, like I said, one of the perks of being around way back then.
He is the dealer's advocate, everybody, and has amazing insight, great insight into this. His family has been in the automotive business as a dealership in the town where I went to high school. I remember Bavia Blatt, Buick, and I think a couple other GM products as well.
That's Len, right. Mostly Buick and Chevy.
Yep, that's right, Chevrolet. Yeah. So Len's family's been in the business a long time. He represents a lot of dealers. There's a lot of good work, and obviously a great resource. So everybody, if you want to reach out to Len, dealerlaw.com. He's active on LinkedIn. You'll see him there as well. Easy to reach, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to continue to have some questions tonight, and you've really made us think, Len. So I thank you for that.
These are just thought starters. But a lot to discuss, and I appreciate the kind words. But I think everybody's got to stand up and be heard, and make this work. If this is the best for all the parties, and hopefully that happens. I think dealers are getting more and more interested in making sure this works for all parties concerned.
I appreciate you telling us more than just the marketing side, because I wanted to get this perspective tonight. So, Len, on behalf of the Fixed Ops community, thank you for all you do for automotive, and I wish you and your family a happy holiday. And I'm sure we're going to be talking again soon, though. I have a feeling.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the platform, and I wish you all the very best for the holidays.
Everybody, on behalf of Katrina Ness, Vanessa Collins, and Len Blavia, I'm Ted Ings. We will see you on Monday here at the Fixed Ops Roundtable. Have a good night.
Good night.